What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors finally reaches his breaking point on live television? When years of frustration spill into a tense exchange that leaves everyone in the studio stunned. Today, we're diving into the moment Samuel L. Jackson lost his cool on Good Morning America. And trust me, you won't believe how it all unfolded. Make sure you subscribe and leave a comment below because this story gets wild. The morning began like any other at the Good Morning America studio in Times Square. Samuel L. Jackson was set for what should have been a simple promotional interview for his new film. The legendary actor, known for his commanding voice and no-nonsense attitude, settled into the chair across from Michael Strahan. The cameras rolled, the red light went on, and what happened next would become one of the most unforgettable moments in morning TV history. Strahan, with his usual cheerful smile, began the interview warmly. "Samuel, great to have you back on Good Morning America. Your new film's getting a lot of buzz. But before we get into that, I want to ask you about some comments you made last week about diversity in Hollywood." Jackson's expression changed. His jaw tightened, and he paused before replying. "Which comment are you referring to, Michael?" "Well," Strahan continued, "you mentioned that despite all the talk about progress, Hollywood still plays games when it comes to true representation. Some thought that was overly critical of an industry that's given you great success." The air grew tense. Jackson leaned forward, his voice calm but edged. "Overly critical? Michael, let me ask you, how long have you been in television?" Strahan blinked, surprised. "About 8 years with GMA, but I've been in broadcasting for much longer." 8 years? Jackson repeated. "And in those 8 years, how often have you been told to tone down your views? How many times have you been warned that honesty might hurt your career?" "Samuel, I think we're getting off track," Strahan said, trying to redirect. Jackson shook his head. "No, we're exactly on track. The moment I talk about diversity, I'm called overly critical. The moment I say we're still fighting the same battles, I'm told to be grateful and quiet." The camera crew exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't part of the plan. Strahan tried to keep calm, but you could see the discomfort. "I don't think anyone's asking you to be quiet, Samuel. You're one of the most successful actors ever. Your voice matters." Jackson let out a low, humorless laugh. "My voice carries weight? Do you know how many rooms I've walked into where I was the only one who looked like me? Do you know how many times I've had to explain why representation matters, not just as business, but as the right thing to do?" "But surely you've seen progress," Strahan offered. Jackson's voice rose slightly. "Progress? Having 1 or 2 faces in power isn't progress. Putting diverse faces on posters and then whitewashing them overseas isn't progress. In the control room, producers were probably panicking. Should they cut to commercial or let this play out?" Strahan pressed on carefully. "Samuel, don't you think focusing on these issues too much might overshadow your positive work?" That question hit hard. Jackson's eyes narrowed. "Overshadow my work? Every project I take represents the hopes of people who look like me. That's not a burden. It's a responsibility." The room went silent. Strahan shifted, realizing the storm he'd stepped into. Yet he pushed again. "With all respect, don't you think focusing too much on division can create more division?" Jackson's face changed. Shock, then anger, then pity. "Create division?" he said quietly. "Are you saying that me talking about inequality causes division?" "That's not what I meant." "No, that's exactly what you meant," Jackson snapped. "This is the problem. The moment someone like me speaks up, I become the angry black man who should calm down and be thankful." "Samuel, I think you're misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding. You're uncomfortable because I'm honest. But when honesty comes from someone who looks like me, suddenly it's too much." The tension was thick. Millions were watching, social media already lighting up. Strahan tried to steady the tone. "I'm just trying to have a balanced conversation." Jackson laughed dryly. "Balanced? When was the last time you asked a white actor if they were too critical about something they cared about? Did you ask Robert Downey Jr. if he was creating division when he spoke about mental health? Or tell Meryl Streep to tone it down when she talked about women's rights?" "That's different," Strahan began, but Jackson raised a hand, silencing him. "Different how? Because they're white? When they speak, it's called advocacy. When I speak, it's called divisive." The cameras caught every second. Jackson wasn't yelling. His control made it even more powerful. "Samuel, you're putting words in my mouth. Strahan said weakly. Am I? Because it sounds like you want me to soften my truth to make it easier for people to hear, to smile, nod, and be grateful. Nobody's asking you to do that. Jackson leaned back, his tone weary. Michael, what's sad is you don't even realize you're doing it. You think you're fair, but you're repeating the same system I'm trying to challenge. I'm not following, Strahan admitted. Of course you're not, Jackson replied. You've never had to wonder if speaking truth might cost you work. You've never had to question if being honest would close doors. That's unfair, Strahan protested. I've faced my own struggles. Jackson shook his head. Have you? Because right now you're questioning why I speak about my community instead of my craft. That says everything. Strahan looked shaken for the first time. Samuel, I ask tough questions to everyone. It's my job. Your job, Jackson said sharply, is to keep people comfortable. My job is to speak truth. We're not the same. Strahan stiffened. I resent that. You resent it? I've spent 10 minutes explaining why my advocacy matters, and you resent that? You've implied I should be more grateful, and now you resent my reaction? The silence in the studio was deafening. I never said that, Strahan whispered. You didn't have to. Every question carried that message. Why can't you just be satisfied? Why stir things up? Jackson stood, his patience gone. You know what the real problem is, Michael? People like you think you can decide which emotions are acceptable for people like me. Samuel, please, let's talk calmly, Strahan pleaded. Calmly? Jackson's laugh was cold. What's irrational is being told to be thankful for being questioned about my right to speak. Nobody's questioning your right. You are. You've done it over and over. You've criticized my tone, my focus, my passion. What do you call that? Cameras caught every second of Jackson's quiet fury, a masterclass in conviction. Can we start over? Strahan asked weakly. Jackson's eyes hardened. Start over? You can't undo this. This is the truth, and it's why we need these conversations. He leaned closer. You want to know what really causes division? It's not people like me speaking out. It's people like you trying to control how we express our frustration. The studio was frozen. Samuel, Strahan said softly, I never meant for it to go this way. Intentions don't matter, Jackson replied. Impact does. And the impact of your questions shows exactly the mindset we need to confront. I was trying to show different perspectives, Strahan muttered. Whose perspective? Jackson demanded. Because it's not mine, or anyone who's had to defend their right to speak truth. The air was heavy. Jackson straightened, his presence filling the room. You know what people will say after this? That I was angry, unprofessional. But no one will ask why you thought it was okay to question my right to care. No one will look at the assumptions behind your questions. He rested his hands on the chair. This is the reality, Michael. When people like me speak, we're called angry. When people like you challenge us, it's called journalism. I'm sorry if I upset you, Strahan said quietly. I'm not upset, Jackson replied. I'm disappointed that we're still having this same conversation. He finally sat, but his eyes didn't leave Strahan. You want to know what real progress is? It's when I can talk about inequality without being told I'm divisive, when passion for justice isn't seen as a threat. Strahan nodded slowly. I think I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything, Jackson said. You owe it to yourself to understand this moment. This is what change looks like, uncomfortable, honest, necessary. He leaned forward. I've seen progress, but I've also seen how quickly people stop pushing once they feel safe. Visibility isn't equality. Representation isn't power. What do you want people to take from this? Strahan asked, his voice soft. That truth isn't divisive, Jackson said. Ignoring truth is. When someone who's succeeded in a flawed system points out that it's still flawed, that's not ingratitude, it's duty. Jackson stood once more, signaling the end. And I want people to understand that success doesn't silence conscience. It amplifies it. He extended his hand and Strahan shook it, visibly humbled. Thank you for having me, Michael. I hope this helps people think differently about change. As Jackson walked off, the cameras kept rolling. The studio stayed silent, the weight of his words lingering. And that's how one of Hollywood's greatest actors reminded everyone what standing for your principles truly looks like, especially when it's uncomfortable and when it matters most.